Item 1 is roll call.
Prairie.
Here.
Holt.
Here.
Bonnie.
Here.
Sowski. Here. Weigel.
Here.
Whitney. Holt. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 2, election of chair and vice chair. Ms. Richards.
In terms of the election of chair and vice chair, this by code is an annual event. It was last done July 26th last year. As you all know, Mr. Weigel is the chair and Jonathan Holt is vice chair. The only requirements are that the chair be a city council member. In terms of vice chair, can be any member. So the election for this body is supposed to occur the next meeting after the JDA elects officers, so that's why we're here today.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mrs. Sowski.
I'd like to elect Danny Weigel as chair.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to elect myself as chair by Sowski, second by Crary. We'll vote on that one first. Is all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I'll make the motion to make Mr. Holt the vice chair.
Second.
We have a nomination by Crary for Mr. Holt as vice chair, second by Osowski. Any further comments?
I have one comment. Mr. Holt, is that all right? Yes.
We'll not change.
Yeah, okay. All right, I fully support it. Amazing vice chair.
Perfect. Seeing no other comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 3 is EDC lease at the high.
You may recall the spring, the EDC's lease for their space in this building was approved on an interim basis through the end of the year. That was mostly because we were still waiting to hear from EDA on our membership structure. In any case, your staff report kind of outlines what their monthly cost was under the previous lease, which was about $3,400 a month. Under our interim basis, which incorporated the membership fee structure that we attach to every tenant in the building, which is $150 a head for all full-time employees. That brought their monthly cost up to $39.50 a month. And then the proposed monthly rate, which would be effective January 1 of next year, brings it up to $41.24. Key elements are that we're looking at really is that effective rate, which is summarized on your staff report for each of those 3 approaches that we've taken. The effective rate as proposed is $17.06 a square foot, which incorporates a base rent of $12.72 a square foot for their 2,900 square feet, plus that $150 per employee membership fee. Other changes from the old system to the new is under their old system, they did have reserved parking spaces on what was the Herald parking lot that is now under construction. Under the new lease, they will just have kind of first come, first serve access to the parking along the alley here to the rear. And the other major changes, they were paying leasehold taxes, but with this conversion of this to a tech accelerator with a lot of moving targets in terms of what space would be subject to leasehold taxes. It was recommended by the city assessor that we just pay those rather than try to track all the movements. So again, the upshot is that their effective lease rate under the proposed system would be $17.06 a square foot, which is kind of right smack in the middle of what the city assessor says is market rate for a space of that type, their type in the downtown. And we are looking at a 5-year term with 1 opportunity for renewal. Mr. Lund presented this to the EDC board and they didn't act on it, but they were supportive of the terms. So he has anything he would like to say, but we're looking for authorization to approve those terms that I just described, again, as a 5-year lease with a 5-year renewal, and then subject to city attorney review, get the documents executed. There is a copy of the existing lease and the draft attached to your staff report. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mr. Crary.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Crary and a second by Osowski. Is there any further comment? Mr. Kafani?
So is there an accelerator or escalator or anything on there?
Yes.
Sorry, just loaded up on here. Okay. That's
Yes,
fine.
and thank you. This is a new addition. Well, your existing was had us.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, the Heralds did, excuse me, yes, too many leases, but yes, this one will incorporate that CPIS later on in the
Mr. Holt?
Mr. Chair, just a note, I am a board member of the EDC. I'm comfortable with this issue.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to item number 4, strategic planning initiative findings.
We have seen this in various forms over the last few months. Many of you have sat on this strategic planning committee. And so today we're just here to kind of wrap it up in terms of this initial phase. I want to thank Andy Conlon, who's been kind of the lead staff person on this. He'll go through a brief staff or PowerPoint presentation over this. And of course, thank committee members who participated, as well as Mark Schill, who's always very helpful in the facilitation and the insight that he offers. As I said, you've seen preliminary findings that have been presented both at the committee meetings and to this group at the last meeting. So, I don't want to repeat too many times, but there's not a whole lot new that we're presenting today. It's mostly to give you the opportunity to comment, to make sure that we have captured what you said and answer any questions that you have. This will then be presented to the JDA, so they will have a similar opportunity, and then really it'll be moving on to those next steps, which kind of the end of both the summary document that we provided and Andy's staff or presentations that he's going to give in just a moment. This was a very helpful exercise for staff. I think, as you know, this was kind of precipitated by reaching those spending caps on 2 of our newer high-risk programs. And while that was the impetus, we looked into other things, and it has been, as I said, helpful for staff, but I hope it was also helpful for you to kind of make sure that we're looking at priorities here in the 2020s, not just we're doing what we've always done. So under that topic, we've talked a lot about changing cash flow. There was discussion about the value of pursuing quality of life as opposed to the more traditional economic development. That these are paths we've already gone down, and that seemed to be reiterated. We talked about in our kind of next steps that we will discontinue programs, that those high-risk programs in their current form, but that does not preclude, coming up with something that would be similar at a different point in time, or a special, whether it's an opportunity that exists to fund a business or another loan program or something. So any case, before I ramble any further, I'm going to let Andy kind of go through the particulars in his presentation. And again, mostly this is to let you give us feedback as we move forward.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. John, if you could advance, I think. So as Meredith just kind of ran through, don't need to give you all the background. A lot of you have seen this several times at this point. So we know why we met, know what we were trying to accomplish, just to bring kind of, as Meredith said, our programs and kind of our processes into the 2020s to make sure that what we're offering is relevant and impactful locally. John, do you want to put up one? I'm not going to read these to you again. This is a lot of these first couple slides are going to be review, but essentially in terms of our process and what we were aiming to achieve through this is essentially a framework of what we're trying to accomplish so that we as staff can, whether it's on our application processes, modification of existing programs, coming up with new programs, all that stuff, basically just a lens through which to look to figure out if we're doing a good job and pushing towards what we're trying to accomplish. So that's what this group came up with, and largely it revolves around kind of being aggressive, taking some calculated risks, and especially so when those risks could make it tangible, significant local impact. So John, push it up one. Staff then has kind of turned back and looked at, okay, with this priority framework, what are some initial action steps, how they apply to our, at least in the very near term. John, if you can push it up one more, I'll just run through kind of these initial ones, these immediate ones, as Meredith alluded to, in terms of just applying that priority framework to our existing programs. And immediate next steps would be to discontinue the Accelerate program in its current form. Like Meredith said, that's not to say we can't do anything, like that, or to pursue similar initiatives or goals, but maybe just doing it in a different way if it makes sense. Similar with the startup program is that we know through this process and everything that maybe that's not the best way or the most effective way to pursue those goals, but that doesn't preclude us from exploring different ways to do so moving forward. But for the time being, our next steps would be to discontinue both of those programs as they currently stand, and then explore alternatives and be part of those discussions. The third immediate next step, what we're looking to do is to apply that framework, that list of priorities to kind of our evaluations of requests. And that's an umbrella term really, I guess, to include our application process on the front end, program descriptions, as well as what we'd like to try to start incorporating into staff reports and what we present to you folks, to add a little bit of nuance to some of these requests, in terms of how a given request kind of stacks up relative to those priorities. It's not necessarily a scorecard or anything like that, but just to try and provide a more complete picture, I guess, as to what this request is that we're bringing forward. That could be a loan request, it could be a new program entirely, just to try to paint that fuller picture again as to how these kind of fit into the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish. So, and with that, depending on whether it's a loan or a large scale program, we'd like to be able to provide some kind of fiscal context. That looks different depending on what the request is or what we're bringing forward, but just to provide again how the fiscal component of a given request fits into the bigger picture of the JDA's finances. So, John, if you want one more. Calling it near term because they're moving targets on some of these, but here's some not immediate, soon next steps. Revise the EDA RLF plan, as well as phase flex phase program parameters. So sort of going back to our evaluation of requests, applications, program descriptions, that sort of thing, to explore and implement as best we can a lot of those priorities pertaining to, not just the kind of businesses that we are attracting, our best ways that we can support and that sort of thing, but also, cash flow, cash balance discussions. We have discussions on that. So what kind of maybe tweaks to certain programs make sense from a cash flow perspective. We talked about for phase flex phase, for example, things we could explore, having minimum loan size, deferral terms, rates, that sort of thing, just to kind of dive into that, see how they look, and how those measures would impact cash flow or cash balance, and then bring that forward to you folks to consider as part of a program parameters update or something like that. Also have on there just to continue to explore quality of life opportunities, and that is quite a big umbrella term, I think. The Children's Museum is obviously the most prominent one, I think, right now, in terms of quality of life opportunities and opportunities for the JDA to participate. But there's also discussions around things like housing and childcare and those type of things that we set at staff level that we're excited to dive into and take a look at and see how the city or the growth fund, however, whichever or both, could play a role in kind of furthering efforts on those fronts too. So one more, John. So like I said, try and be real quick and at the risk of repeating enough stuff they've already seen already. As Meredith said, what we're aiming to do here really today is not to provide new information, but just to provide an opportunity for you folks to give us kind of maybe last comments on this initial phase of the project. The intention from staff, I think, is to incorporate that priority framework that would come up with through this process into kind of our administrative actions on the back end, and incorporate that in terms of requests we bring forward to you folks. But again, just wanted to provide another opportunity for any comments, things we might have missed, or anything you'd like to see included or changed, or that sort of thing, prior to us kind of really launching into that. So, I understand any questions.
Mr. Conley, comment?
Comment and then a question, maybe. So if I were to give my synopsis of just the experience of being on that process was, stepping back from maybe some of the fringe things that we've been doing and further supporting the key industries that make our, region successful, and then not focusing so much on how do we create jobs, but how do we get people to recognize the value of moving to Grand Forks, to physically be here, to, quality of life things came up. I think we had discussions around, what's our brand? Like why Grand Forks? I think that's an important thing that I think we all have our own answers. And we had talked a little bit about, is that something that's worth spending a little bit of time on to make sure that we're distilling it in a way that makes sense to someone out of state, The other piece I'd like to touch on too is that the mayor's been, championing the quality of life movement, and really he's just been stealing your thunder. This is something that you've been working on with us for a long time, right? And presenting this. So I think maybe we should all take a moment and thank Andy and his team and everyone for everything that they've done with this, and make sure that the mayor doesn't get too much credit for that.
Further comments? Questions, concerns? Anybody? Andy, this will come, obviously I'm looking at staff report, but all these priorities such as loan programs and high risk city run investment, incentive programs, third party venture funds, and so on and so forth. All this stuff will come back. This is just the first stop, correct? This will all be moved to JDA to have some further discussion on city council.
100%. So this is like whether it's different loan programs or venture fund or any of those things. Those are in there almost as examples at this point, just to kind of frame out what we can do an awful lot of things, but where our efforts best targeted. So that's the phase we're at now. Any one of those things, both this as guidelines will go to JDA on its own, but then any one of those individual programs as they'd be brought forward, but also be brought back forward through this group as well as JDAs.
Perfect. Mr. Phelan?
Just want to highlight the reason why we can invest in that children's museum. We have in the budget, but we have to execute that, is that we do have a cash balance. And so I think the intent is, a lot of these programs get started, and I've been around it for a little, like the startup program got started. And then it kind of fades a little bit. The Accelerate Grand Forks program got started up once, LIFT got going. So I think our intent is to put a period on some of these programs to once again prove to the public that we can stop things. Programs, we know how to do that. And they may come back in a different form or fashion, but a lot of these things will come back after several years. And so I think that's what we're saying right now. Let's put a period on those two programs in particular, but they may come back with your fingerprints on them in a more refined and in a better way that fits where we're at currently. And I think, thankfully, we do have cash balance to do a lot of one-time opportunities, whether it's helping a business expand, whether it's starting innovative programs, infrastructure, and all those sorts of things. So we want to make sure that you do have some opportunities to put your own fingerprints on it. It's not like we're without resources, aren't able to do something. So thank you for all you've done, and I agree with you. Thanks for the community development staff.
One question, Todd, while you're up there, maybe. Is there anything in terms of code or law that might need to be updated for us to spend these funds differently than we have before? So if we're looking at more quality of life investments, should we anticipate any sort of changes to how the code is written in terms of how we can currently spend these funds, or is it pretty flexible?
That's a very good question. Whomever the original drafters were back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, they're pretty broad in general. And which I think should be a reminder to all of us as we move forward to allow flexibility. So, Mr. Costa, do you see anything bright line that would need to get changed as part of us moving forward?
I'll stop. Yeah, it's
I think it's feelings right. The broad language, at least with respect to sales tax provisions, are fairly broad, where the use of these funds could be used for the children's museum because it's economic development and a few other things. So I wouldn't envision it. I certainly take a look at it, but I just don't see anything on the horizon that necessitate ordinance changes. So okay, great. Thank you.
Mrs. Suski.
So on the slideshow, it just listed the Children's Museum as an example. I guess the concern that I have with that is we have already budgeted $10 million. And then would these be additional funds then going, next thing you know, are we spending, $20 million in taxpayer money on a museum?
In terms of, budgeting and stuff like that, I suppose that would be the purview of the, elected officials and the mayor to determine what's an appropriate amount to budget or anything like that. In terms of what's that being included in this presentation, that was, like I said, mainly just to list as an example and one that we are pursuing, currently. There could be a variety of other things that maybe not specific to the Children's Museum, but any number of other opportunities, quality of life wise. Just like a daycare loan program or something like that. Anything kind of in that realm that maybe funds could also be dedicated towards. But in terms of which resources would be allocated to which.
I just want to make sure that sometimes these people aren't like double dipping, getting out of this pot and then getting out of this pot. And next thing you know, they're just getting a lot of taxpayer money. So.
Sure. Well, I think to follow up Mrs. Zowski's point as well, and I'm not going to comment on, city council, the budget that was passed, but I think a lot of the discussion we had when this was going on was, if you really boil it down very simply, stating, corporate center 1 and 2 sold, big cash balances sitting in the account, what's the best use of those funds? And so that's what we're talking about, quality of life again, whether it's Children's Museum, whether it's, child care, whatever it is, we have a lot of cash right now that more than usual, more than just the sales tax, the bucket getting funded, these one-time funds. We're trying to think through like, hey, let's get creative and what provides the most impact to the problems we have in the community. If we have these funds, let's put them to work versus just let them sit and deteriorate with inflation and whatnot. So that was the intention, at least I think from this committee's objective, yes, use that for something like that.
And the Children's Museum was just an example.
Sure.
We haven't committed to that, correct?
In terms, let's answer that one.
Council member Osowski, you prioritized it as a possible, but as we said, the budget will get approved in September. And then for use of those funds, development agreement will come back for how to use those, when they can be used. And so it just sets a priority and or the expectation that the city council or the JDA in this court has set a priority, but with all the executive details that have to come back.
Thank you.
Similar to the, where we're talking about indoor sports and those sort of things. And I think Mr. Salami hit it right. We're saying quality of life is a workforce development initiative. And so again, just because things evolve, if I think Council President Sandy and Weber have been around here a while too with me. If we would have said those things 10 years ago, we would have been laughed off this podium here. So it shows how things have changed. And that people really recognize the importance of those facilities and the importance of, really to the core of a city. And they're just not fun and nice things. They're essential things for us to compete with other communities. And it's amazing to see how that's become a prime issue, whereas before it was seen as kind of a nice side issue, but it's become but that's what the 10 years of sitting here is. We would have not been having the same discussion 10 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. I don't think we need to vote on this information only, correct?
I think it'd be good for you to concur and move this forward. The JDA is recommending by.
Sounds good. Is there a motion?
I have a question. So on this, if we vote yes, am I stating that I am prioritizing the museum for this?
I think you'd be saying that you're prioritizing the ideas of moving from the old high-risk programs to a different program. I don't think we're prioritizing any specific project at this point. Just a general idea of moving from one to the other.
It's a master plan. I think if you approve this, you're generally agreeing with quality of life investments are important and should be prioritized. And Mr. Conlon gave you an example of one. There's going to be others, but all of those individual items have to come back to either the JDA or City Council for final approval. You're approving the concept. This is a master plan.
So not only are we like with our other funds of money moving towards quality of life, now we're moving just completely everything towards quality of life?
No, I think you still have a PACE program, you have a flex space program. You're going to prioritize. I think the big change in this program is really prioritizing quality of life investments as part of our overall scheme. And within that area is we're looking at other workforce, not just facilities like children's museums as an example, but also childcare, other things that really allow people to get to work or want to come to our community and stay in our community. That's probably the big major paradigm shift. On the other things with the accelerator grant works and the startup, we're just putting a period on those things. We're not saying startup programs are not important or high risk, accelerating in certain industries are important, but let's put a period on those two specific programs. And if we bring them back, let's bring them back in a place that will maybe move the needle a little bit further in that farm fashion.
So a comment here, I feel like I'm a little bit to blame for this. So when I first came on council, Brandon Bombach had presented kind of the status of the funds and none had defaulted. And I asked the question, shouldn't some be defaulting? Like, shouldn't we be more aggressive? And that's kind of, we pivoted a little bit. I don't know if it was in process or where it was going. And it seems like we definitely pivoted and went towards, I would say we shot for the moon, and some of them panned out and some of them didn't. And now we're kind of just saying, rather than a technology that's unproven, we might want to spend $250,000 on Topgolf coming here, which if I can make that motion, I would. So I think that's the attitude shift, is just like, how do we get people to see this as the community to live in? And I don't think we need more jobs. I think that ship is taken care of.
Sure, Wildlife. I could mention two other programs that we used to do. Purchasing land was something that we've done in the past. That's how you get a business park that we have right now. The other thing we did over the last, several years, is then not only would we purchase land, then we'd also put in infrastructure on land to try to grow the primary sector. That's why we have areas off of Gateway Drive, off of Demers, off of 32nd. And really what we're saying now is we've seeded enough areas that we don't need to do that right now. There's plenty of areas you can grow with logistics parks and all those sorts of things. So let's put a pause on that and then prioritize things too. So those are two other areas that in this plan, we're not saying, hey, we got to go out and build a business park. We're not saying we're going to open up a bunch more areas for primary sector businesses. We've already done that. So let's reprioritize ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make the motion to move this forward to JDA.
We have a motion by Kavame.
With or without Topgolf?
With Topgolf?
I'll second it.
Second by Holt. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 5 is past student loans.
Good evening again. So back again with an update on various past due loans. I think there's some in here that don't require a motion, or just an informational update. Others that we will be asking for a motion on. So I think for simplicity's sake and probably Dan's sanity, we'll go one at a time. I think in terms of updates on these loans and where they're at and kind of what's expected next. So the first one we'll touch on is mobile recon. You'll recall, been here several times talking about that one. I've been working with the owner for a restructure, ceased communications at a certain point. And this body had authorized us to go forward with the city attorney to pursue collection. So I just let Dan provide any update on that one at this time.
While we were drafting the complaint to start the collection action, we were actually sued. The JDA was sued by Choice Financial because they've got some loans out there to mobile recon as well, several of them. 5 of them that are they alleged to be secured by personal property of mobile recon that we'd also have a security interest in. The total amount alleged to be owed by Choice in the complaint is a little over $450,000. Choice also has another debt that's secured by real estate. That one is about $190,000. So Choice is owed about a little south of $650,000. And so we were able to communicate with the attorney for Choice. They're not seeking any monetary amount from the JDA. They're only asserting that their lead priority is superior to ours and just trying to effectively foreclose our lead priority is their position. They're alleging a first position. So I've talked to the Choice attorney, because of my scheduling, I got until September 5th to serve an answer to that complaint. In the interim, we more than likely, rather than bring an independent action, probably bring a cross claim against Mobile Recon, because they're a defendant and the guarantors are defendants in the choice action. So it'd be an answer and then a cross claim against those three defendants. Also named in the lawsuit by choice include the SBA that also must have some security interests in some of the assets. So that's the update. We will start answering the complaint by September 5th, and the cross claim will occur at that point as well.
Mr. Gusta, do you need a motion for any of that?
I don't, because that one, I think you gave me direction on that already. But I just wanted to update you as to why I haven't considered with some of the complaints, because this came in the interim, and so we kind of had to go a different path.
Just a question, if I may. So just I understand they're not suing us for monetary. Is there some ambiguity in either their or our loan documents that would require this action, or is it not spelled out like who's the first position, who's the second position, or is this standard practice maybe?
It's not unusual that when secured creditors, you have a debtor not paying, secured creditors will come in and assert a first or second position, and they have to do it. It's not unusual at all, because if they don't name us, then our security interests are still out there, and they don't have quarter. It's who's on the first position. So, okay, thank you.
Perfect. We'll move on to French Taste, I believe.
Yes, so French Taste, you recall, has both C-Run and startup loan with us, delinquent on both. Initial conversations again, and then the business owner ceased communications with us. We brought that forward to this group sort of as a informal update. In addition, actually, to Amy's place, the next one, I'll just touch on that one as well, which again, similar, tried to work with the business owner, communication ceased. So typically our process through both of those would have been to refer them to SBDC to work out a restructure plan and continue to work with them. Difficult to do without any communication. So when that was brought to this group, we received kind of informal, the sense that we should treat them the same as Mobile Recon and work with the city attorney to pursue collections. What we're requesting tonight is the formal authorization from this body to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney.
I would make a motion that we do that and move forward. Second.
We have a motion by Whitney, second by Osowski. Seeing no further comment, Mr. Curry, comment?
To Mr. Gosted, so say you pursue this for whatever reason, you still can't communicate ultimately, like, in if you're going for collections, ultimately, what are the odds of getting anything, or is there like a bell curve on that, or is it just everyone's just kind of see what happens?
Two loans, one is a little less than $35,000, the other one's $30,000, right? I think the analysis needs to be, and I've had some discussions with staff about this, is do you pursue this through maybe a small claims? And I think that was discussed as well. That means you're going to take a haircut, right? Because you can only pursue $15,000 in small claims. But it might cost you less than for my firm to pursue the collection action after fees and costs. I do this often. I have a discussion with the client is this decision needs to be made is where do you want to take this? And those are some of the discussions we'll have. Do we pursue a collection action through my office, seek the full amount, or pursue some sort of small claims action? Now, judgment's a piece of paper. It means you win. Doesn't mean that you can't take that to the grocery store and start buying groceries with the judgment, right? Still got to turn that into cash in some fashion. So the collectability is something that has to play into it as well. With that said, however, I would not consider at this point doing nothing. At least you can get some sort of judgment, possibly default judgment, and make your analysis as to how much you want to spend to try to collect that.
So that, exactly, so that's kind of my point too, that the motion then essentially to pursue that and figure out what is the best business decision. You know, we got to do something. We also got to be realistic as well. So what's our least cost? We don't want to go further backwards. If we're not going to collect any either, but this motion just to pursue that avenue, then you'll present what's the best, what option we should do. Correct. You're a professional. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Yeah, item number 6 is our annual report, Mr. Hunt.
I was just going to mention one last thing on the previous item, just a couple of close detailing and integrity fundraisers. Still working with both of those groups. The progress is slower, obviously, than we would like, but they are still working with SBC on restructure there. So for annual reporting.
The annual report is just receive and file. It's historic data, kind of a summary of actions by this group and the growth fund, and as well as financial information in kind of summary form. So no action, just enjoy the meeting. And that's all we have.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else on the agenda,
Motion adjourned.
Sowski motions to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's adjourned. Or committee.